Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We're so happy to get a chance to talk to you and hear from you today. I'm Robert Dyan. I teach American government at the University of Evansville in Indiana.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zach Eastburn. I'm an attorney in Madison, Wisconsin.
Hello and congratulations to you. My name is Tom Tinder. I'm an attorney in Charleston, West Virginia.
I'm Candace.
My name is Samantha Lugo.
Hello, I'm Jillian Kahn, and our coach is Brianna Willits.
Terrific. So the question I'm going to read to you is the first question about the pardon power. And after I'm done, I'm eager to hear what you've got for us. It starts with a quote. Quote, "It would be inconsistent with the constitutional separation of the executive and legislative powers to let the pardon power be exercised by the latter." Close quote. What were the framers' reasons for giving the president the pardon power? And do you agree or disagree with them? According to the framer James Wilson, if the president abuses the pardon power, he can be impeached and prosecuted. Do you agree with Wilson? Why or why not? And finally, in your opinion, what constitutes high crimes and misdemeanors?
Rosa Parks protested for racial equality of African Americans and was sent to jail, only to be pardoned after her death for that unjust imprisonment.
Roger Clinton, convicted of drug abuse, was pardoned, only to be arrested on charges of drunk driving less than a year later.
Roger's pardon allows his rights to be restored, yet Rosa Parks did not live to see the government recognize their guilt for her jail time.
The pardon power creates tension between the tool of mercy and the abuse of power.
Federalists 69 and 74 clarified that pardons are an easy access to exceptions in favor of unfortunate guilt. Washington pardoned Whiskey Rebellion leaders, showing swift action restores order during trying times. More concerned with partisan politics, Congress might be less empathetic. If this process were delayed by the need to get congressional approval, then peace and safety of the public could be threatened.
Jefferson pardoned those wrongly convicted under the Unconstitutional Sedition Act, thus restoring liberty for those punished. Similarly, the Obama administration created the Clemency Initiative program, allowing prisoners to apply for clemency, repairing the damage from broken drug sentencing laws that still give Black Americans harsher and longer sentences. As a result, allowing the prerogative to be exercised by the latter would be incompatible with the constitutional division of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches.
The president can be impeached if they grant a pardon to someone who's foregoing an impeachment process. The pardon clause is exclusive and broad, yet in Schick v. Reed in 1974, the court held that the pardoning power's limitations are only found within the Constitution. Moreover, Chief Justice Story remarked that if the pardon power were applied to impeachments, the impeachment process would be rendered wholly ineffective as a deterrent to political offenses.
The framers were influenced by English common law. The 1701 Act of Settlement established that the king could not pardon to preempt impeachment as a check against corruption. This is reflected in Article 2, Section 3, which states a president has the power to grant reprieves except in cases of impeachment.
The 1866 Ex Post Garland case upheld the idea that besides impeachment, the pardoning power is unlimited as implied by the Constitution. As James Wilson expressed, if a president abuses the pardon power, Congress abides with the power to check the executive with impeachment, as stated in Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution.
Parliament impeached Lord Latimer in 1376 for mismanaging the military, establishing the precedent of impeachment. Mason and Madison drafted the Virginia Plan, allowing for Congress to impeach the president for malpractice or neglect of duty.
Ratification, the language was changed to high crimes and misdemeanors, but many consider such words to mean the same. The House tends to view high crimes and misdemeanors to be ethical violations. Those who do not abide by ethics violate the social contract between them and their constituency. Impeached for committing perjury, Clinton morally damned himself in the eyes of the House through his extramarital relationship with Monica Lewinsky.
Out of the 21 office holders impeached, the Senate has only convicted 8 because the Senate holds high crimes and misdemeanors to more precise legal arguments. In the recent impeachment of Donald Trump, Chuck Grassley of Iowa recognized that Trump's language was extreme, aggressive, and even irresponsible. But the Senate did not convict him because they believed that it was unconstitutional and that the prosecution did not meet the burden of proof. As the context of these words have grown, we've come to realize that it all boils down to hyperpartisanship and a breach of ethics.
Voltaire stated, "Let us pardon each other's folly. That is the first law of nature." The pardoning power establishes the executive's commitment to uphold constitutional values.
All right, thanks very much. There's a lot there to deal with. Let me ask about the thing you said regarding Hamilton's notion that swift action can restore order during turbulent times. We've seen that in the past, and I would submit that we're living through turbulent times right now. Would you propose that the previous president or the current president issue some sort of mass pardon as a result of the events of the last January?
So it's really interesting to think about whether President Biden or President Trump should have issued a pardon for all of those people who rioted at the Capitol on January 6th. In my opinion, we definitely should not, because there's a difference between moral pardons and immoral pardons. We argue that because a lot of time laws are morally unjust, or 20, 30 years in the future, we recognize that some laws are discriminatory, then people should be pardoned. But just like how we mentioned with Roger Clinton, people that ethically violate the law should be prosecuted and be upheld to the same standard of everyone else. The only reason you could justify a mass pardon is to create some sense of stability. But even that argument is very weak.
During the Constitutional Convention, Edward Randolph explained and wanted to include a provision within the pardoning act, that the pardoning power within the Constitution, to include and restrict treason. Yet James Wilson explained that in order for the country to come to a unity, as seen with George Washington's pardon of the Whiskey Rebellion and the draft dodgers during the Vietnam War, there needs to be unity. Therefore, treason is an exception to this.
In our time, we have a political polarization, and with the two former President Trump and current President Biden, there is that evidence of a political polarization. To echo the sentiments of anti-federalists, pardons can possibly be used to not correct judicial errors, but to instead further the president's political agenda. So that is why mass pardoning could be seen as just a political stunt instead of something that could further the common good.
Thank you. So I want to take a look at the issues of limits around pardon power. I understand that you cited Garland, and there are a couple other cases that say that it's unlimited, that's a plenary power. I understand that. Does that mean that it's unreviewable by the judiciary?
So
I just want to follow up on that, sorry. If the answer is no, do you think that the judiciary should be able to review pardons?
So it's really interesting in the context of judicial review whether the Supreme Court has the ability to review the president's actions. But because impeachments aren't necessarily regarding legislative action, they're regarding the executive's action, the Supreme Court and the judiciary has absolutely no ability to preside over this, whether calling it moral, immoral, because we saw in Schick versus Reed, the only exception in cases of pardons is during an act of impeachment. But the Supreme Court does not have that ability because of that judicial review.
Furthermore, to add on to what my partner said, in Connecticut Board v. Dumshat, Connecticut Board of Pardon v. Dumshat, the Supreme Court stated that it is not within their judicial review to acknowledge whether a pardon is following the rule of law, because it is stated within the Constitution.
The idea that the judiciary could check the president for his or her pardon power is violating this idea of the three branches and the three separations. So if the pardon power is supposed to be a check on the judiciary and to correct judicial errors, then having the judiciary check the president is all evidently just not in accordance to that American principle.
Yeah, I would argue that it should be within the judiciary's element and judicial review to check the president's pardoning power. An example of a pardon that can be seen as destructive towards human rights is the pardoning of Sheriff Arpaia of Arizona, where former President Trump pardoned him, yet many agree, and it is controversial, that he violated many human rights.
However, I would argue.
Let me go on to another issue. You have really done a good job on that one. Let's go over to impeachment. And do you think the judiciary should be more involved in the impeachment process? Why or why not? I'm not asking whether or not it's feasible to get involved, or whether, do you think, in your opinion, it would be good to have the judiciary involved in some way more than they are now in impeachment?
Something that's really interesting in the impeachment process is that the Chief Justice does oversee in the Senate whether the president is deemed guilty or not guilty of the crimes and then convicted of it. However, I believe that involving the judiciary more than that would decrease the pathos and logos of that judiciary. Involving the judiciary in hyper-partisan politics, impeachments are really only because of politics. And when you do that, you almost stain the judiciary with more partisanship, more than they already have. I mean, we've seen when the Senate approves certain Supreme Court justices, such as Amy Coney Barrett, that was already political. But to involve them even more in the impeachment process of the possible president that got them into the Supreme Court, that's extremely convoluted and doesn't necessarily achieve the purpose of a fair trial.
I would disagree, because in Ex parte Wells, the Supreme Court stated that our interpretation of Article 1, Section 2 of the pardoning clause in cases except for impeachment, we understand that as that the president cannot impeach someone who's going through an impeachment process. Yet I would state that the court should reiterate and state that the president cannot pardon someone if he himself is going through impeachment or if he has already been impeached, in order to provide a safeguard towards abuse.
To echo the sentiments of my partner, Jillian, involving the judiciary would also wrap them into this idea, the hyperpartisanship of especially today's climate. So, of course, we've seen the grounds on which presidents have been impeached. So, looking at Nixon, there was evidence that he knew of the breaking in of the DC Watergate scandal. So that brought in evidence that he was against his presidential responsibilities. But of course, with Clinton, he had a social ethical violation of having a relationship with the secretary. So, and wrapping the judiciary in is further exposing them to the partisanship of the differing times.
Thank you.
Well done. I didn't jump in. I could have had one last crack in that last minute. I was enjoying listening to you too much, and I didn't want to interrupt the flow because this was an exceptional presentation and a really stimulating discussion. I like the way you juxtaposed right at the beginning the tension between the purpose of pardons as an instrument of mercy or as something for cheaper, tawdry political gains. You walked us through some of the history that was important. You gave us lots of good examples. You included Schick v. Reed, which not everybody's doing, but I'm glad you did. In the Q&A, there were some really, really thoughtful, well-crafted answers, and then there were others that if we had more time than this painfully short 8 minutes, I would sure love to hear what your minds had to say about it. Because like on my question, the first one, you said there are moral pardons and immoral pardons, and we shouldn't pardon the January 6th insurrection, but I guess it was moral for Washington to pardon the Whiskey Rebellion, or moral to pardon the Confederate soldiers. And I'd like to drill down a little further and think about that. Feelings must have been raw in Pennsylvania back then, or in the South back then, and certainly they're raw now. And I'd like to know why one instance is brings tranquility and the other doesn't. But that's a discussion for another day. Wait a minute. The other quibble, because I'm quibbling because you guys are really good. There was a suggestion that if the judicial branch had some sort of influence on pardons, that would violate the separation of powers. But gosh, we have a very intricate system of checks and balances, and having a response to a check, I don't think is necessarily a violation. It's just a furtherance of the sort of diffusion of power. The president can veto, but the Congress can override. And in this instance, there is no sort of response to a pardon. And I think the operative question today was, is that a good idea that the president has such a free hand? There are certainly differences of opinion about that, but gosh, what a remarkable group of people you are, and a very stimulating discussion. And my hat's off to whoever helped you today, and I want to know what's in the water out there in Arizona.
Yes, thanks, Robert. So the word that I wrote down at the beginning, or well, towards the end really, about the whole thing was just passionate. I think that was like very clear in your presentation, and then also in the Q&A. You guys gave answers that were well supported, but you did it in a way that it seemed clear to me that you were advocating with gusto. I don't know, there's probably a better way to put this, but you guys did a really good job in your presentation. I also subscribed to the beginning. I thought you guys did a good job in your opening remarks, painting a picture and a contrast that's memorable, that will stick with us for the entirety of this judicial judging process. You know, like, oh yeah, we'll remember the Rosa Parks, Roger Clinton, dichotomy here. And so that's a really memorable thing. Good, hats off to you on that. One thing, yes. Yeah, so with this question on judicial review and our pardons reviewable, you know, it's a question that's there. And, you know, I understand that there are cases out there that say that where the Supreme Court says, oh, well, it's a plenary power, blah, 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 blah. But the Supreme Court is saying that it is in a sense reviewing it. And so I think there is an argument out there to say that they could review it, and that's a theoretical thing. What you guys did provide an answer where you staked a position on it, and you guys kind of followed along. What I would have liked to have seen with that was maybe a counter to that, and to say, well, maybe it is reviewable, and here's why I think it, and here's why I think it should be, at least. And I think you guys did ultimately get to that, where, you know, I think one of you said it should be in the judiciary's purview, even if it's not right now. So we got there, and that I really appreciated that. But you guys are the first group that I've seen where one of you, to Tom's question, gave an answer, said, yes, this is what I think on this. And then someone else said, well, I disagree with my colleague, and gave your answer. And to me, that was music to my ears for lots of reasons. Not only because I don't think disagreement in and of itself is important, but because these are issues that there are, as you know, there's no one right answer, and there's lots of different views on this stuff, and it's important that people not only explore it, but do it in a way that is respectful. And I think you guys did that. So good job.
According to my clock, we have 11 more minutes before our next presentation. And so consequently, I'd ask Carol to put about another 7 or 8 minutes on the clock. And I'd like to have more discussion, because that was superb. You started out with Rosa Parks, and when those words came out, I thought, oh, this is too bad. They're answering another question. I mean, where's Rosa Parks? You know, they're going to talk about civil rights or something like that. And then you showed right. And I did not know that. I should have known that she'd been pardoned. Yes, I did know that, I guess. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is you got me from the get-go. Then I got very concerned in the Q&A that you all have some supernatural powers, because it was like you knew the question that was coming and you had the answer for it. I mean, you didn't deliberate, you didn't, and that shows what a wealth of knowledge and information that you have. And Zach always makes a comment about people giving us both sides, not only what they're in favor of, but the other side. And when you started that and giving the other side of that one question, I thought I could see him starting to smile. I don't know what else to say other than I learned stuff from you. Thank you for educating me on a number of points that we had not heard before and that I did not know. Overall, you just did a splendid job. And I just must close by saying you all are good citizens already, and you're leaders, I know, in your school. Please don't consider this to be some sort of classroom activity and it's over on Tuesday or whatever. Please continue to be involved and participate in our civic education process and our government process, because we need leaders like you. Congratulations, that was superb.
Thank you.
Thank you.